My name is Tamika Melvin, Senior Vice President of the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Today, I would like to welcome you to INLIVIAN's Lunch and Learn series hosted by the Housing Choice Voucher Program. As you all know, the federal eviction moratorium will be ending on July 31st. Last month, we had guest speaker Chris Lozak to provide information for housing providers on the next steps after the eviction moratorium. This month, we are pleased to have Erin Barbee from DreamKey Partners to provide an overview of assistance available through the rent and mortgage payment program to help assist families impacted by COVID-19. Good afternoon, Erin. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So I really appreciate the opportunity to be welcomed to this Lunch and Learn to talk about the Rent and Mortgage Assistance Program through DreamKey Partners, the City of Charlotte, and Mecklenburg County. Before we get into the presentation, I want to talk a little bit about what you can expect today. So first, I'll give you some background and talk where we come from and talk about where we are right now in 2021. We'll go over the specifics about the program itself and documentation that's required. What are some of the eligibility requirements? We'll also talk about how tenants and landlord can gain access to the program, and I'll answer some questions that are frequently asked of me as we've gone through this process. We'll also talk about what's next as the eviction moratorium is being lifted and how DreamKey Partners, the City of Charlotte, and Mecklenburg County is responding to that. So DreamKey Partners may be a new name to you. We recently changed our name in February of 2021 from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Housing Partnership to DreamKey Partners. Our nonprofit organization has generally been focused on the production of affordable housing and providing programs for people on their pathway to home ownership. Now, in 2020, things were different for all of us, and our organization stepped up to be the administrator on behalf of the City of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County of the Emergency Rental and Mortgage Assistance Programs. We began that in April of 2020. Last year, we pushed out $18 million into the community to make sure that over 6,000 families remained housed. What we know about 2020 is that it was a year that came with no rules, especially as it pertained to emergency assistance. But through the guidance of the Treasury, we've been provided with guardrails and with rules of how we can administer these funds in 2021. So let's talk about that now. Next slide. So in 2021, there are different pots of funds that are available. And with each pot of funds comes a little bit of a different set of rules. For today, we're only going to talk about pots of funds called ERA1 and ERA2. ERA means Emergency Rental Assistance Pot 1, Emergency Rental Assistance Pot 2. So funding goes directly to the municipalities from the government. So the City of Charlotte in 2021 received $24 million, and Mecklenburg County received $6.7 million. Those allocations were based upon the size of the city and the county and where the funds needed to go most immediately. With each pot of funds, DreamKey Partners and the City of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County are given time frames with which we need to spend those dollars. For this round, the City of Charlotte funds began February 9th, and they're good through September 30th, 2021, or when the funds are exhausted. Through Mecklenburg County, the funds began on April 14th, 2021, and they were to go through June 30th of 2021, or when they were exhausted. The funds only cover rent assistance, that includes late fees, utility assistance, and hotel assistance. And utilities in this sense include gas, water, electric, and now the Treasury has included internet as a utility in response to some of the needs that families had in 2020. So from a location perspective, each pot of funds goes to a specific jurisdiction. So for the City of Charlotte, it's only within the City of Charlotte city limits. For Mecklenburg County, it covers the townships and unincorporated areas and the City of Charlotte if need be. Additionally, in 2021, one of the great new guidelines that we've been given by Treasury is that landlords can apply on behalf of tenants, and we'll talk more about that. Next slide. So let's get into eligibility. Eligibility has been very specifically assigned by the Treasury Department, and it's any eligible household defined as a renter household. And that's important to know because we consider that renter households could also be those who are living in a hotel. And also, at least one or more individual meets the criteria I'll talk about in just a moment. So they have to have qualified for unemployment or experience a reduction in their household income. That could be because of a job change, job loss, fewer hours, or they have incurred significant costs, meaning because my child was out of school for a period of time, I had to pay for childcare. That was a significant cost for me, and now I'm having difficulty paying my rent. Or they've experienced a significant financial hardship, all due to COVID-19. Financial hardships may be, I suffered from illness and I had to pay a lot of medical bills, and now I don't have the ability to pay for my rent. The key piece there is that it has to be directly related to COVID-19. As we move further and further from the beginning of the pandemic, that can become difficult, but luckily the Treasury has given us some leeway to say that it can be directly related to COVID-19 or indirectly related to COVID-19. And our counselors will work with tenants and landlords to find that connection line. Also, you have to experience a risk of experiencing homelessness, the demonstrated risk of experiencing homelessness or housing instability. Prior to the eviction moratorium being lifted, what that meant was if someone was living in their home, they were having difficulty paying for their rent, and if evictions were in place, they would receive one, then that qualifies as the possibility of experiencing homelessness or housing instability. Or by nature of living in a hotel, there is imminent risk of someone experiencing homelessness or housing instability. Those are all qualifiers underneath this program. And also, it has to be a lower income family or individual. In this sense, lower income means anyone at 80% AMI and below. And the AMI chart, if you're looking for those specific numbers, are located on the RAMP CLT site that we'll talk about a little bit later. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, in 2020, we didn't have any guardrails. The Treasury didn't tell us who we needed to prioritize or how to push the funds out. It was mainly first come, first serve. But this time we do have some parameters, and those have even shifted as we've moved forward closer to the eviction moratorium. Prior to August 1st, we had 3 levels of priority, and they were the bottom 3, which are 3 through 5 now. Anyone at 50% AMI and below, and they've been unemployed for 90 days or more, were considered our highest priority. And beyond that, it was 50% AMI below or unemployed for 90 days or more. And priority 3 at the time was everyone else who's eligible for the program at 80% AMI and below. This prioritization, being completely transparent, has caused a lot of frustration for people because they say, I need help now. Why haven't I received the assistance? And our only response to that is the Treasury, City of Charlotte, and Mecklenburg County want to ensure that the most vulnerable in our community are able to receive the funds first, which is why there is a significant leaning in on people who are at 50% AMI and below and have been unemployed for 90 days. They are considered to be the most at risk of being homeless. Now, moving forward, going into August 1st, as the eviction moratorium is lifted, we have also had to shift our priorities for Treasury, City of Charlotte, and Mecklenburg County to make sure that we are keeping our focus on the most vulnerable. So there's a change in how we prioritize. Now going from 3 priorities to 5 priorities. The first priority are any applicants who are at 80% AMI and below, and they've been served an eviction notice, and they have a court date within 90 days, and that's first come, first served. What we recognize and have been told is that there are about 2,600 people already in the court system pipeline that as of August 2nd will receive a notification that their court date is coming. Those are the people that we consider to be the most vulnerable and that we want to put our energy into making sure that they stay in their home. They are at imminent risk of homelessness. Beyond that is priority 2. And that's something that Treasury has also shifted us to focus on, which are those at 30% AMI and below and have been unemployed for 90 days or more. These vulnerable members of our community are the ones that absolutely need access to these funds for housing stability. So we encourage that anyone in these categories would please apply as soon as the portal opens. We have a rolling application process, and the applications open on the 1st of every month and they close on the 15th of every month. And there's a reason for that. Currently, we've received since February over 14,000 applications. And like any organization, capacity to be able to process 14,000 applications means that we have to give time to be able to make to process, to work with people, to talk with them, gather documentation. So that is why the process is closed from the 15th through the end of the month. It gives my counselors an opportunity to move through processing by priority. So the application process opens again on August 1st. Again, you can go to www.rampclt.com, that's rampclt.com, to gain access to the application. Our application is in both Spanish and English. And if someone has difficulty with accessing the application on the RampCLT website, you can find a phone number that you can do an over-the-phone application. Next slide, please. So now let's talk about the documentation requirements. And these are as of July 21st, and nothing has changed just yet. But we want people to be fully prepared when they're putting in their application. Oftentimes, the reason that people are not moved forward in the process, or it takes a significantly long time for someone to get processed, is because we're going back and forth gathering data for them. The Treasury does require that we have documentation in order to prove that someone really does need the help. And it also helps us to weed out those that may be applying in a fraudulent way and trying to gain access to the funds when really we need to get them to the most vulnerable. So the documents that are required are their ID, and their ID doesn't have to necessarily be a US ID. We do take and work with people who are undocumented. We need something that says this person is who they say they are, whatever that may look like. We also need a current lease. We recognize that not every lease is a written lease. You can have a verbal lease with someone, and you'll work with our client, with our counselors to be able to get the documentation we need to show that that is a lease, either it's written or it's verbal. We also need a current ledger from the hotel or from the rental complex. The reason we need a ledger and not just a current bill is because we need to be able to see over time when the hardship began and when payments started to decrease or stop altogether. So we can make payments going back to March 20th of 2020, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And we need to be able to see a ledger that goes back to that time frame if someone needs assistance going back to 2020. We also need proof of income, and that could be a lot of things. We recognize that not everyone has traditional proof of income, tax returns, things like that. But we have had creative use of things like the PayPal app or Cash App to show over time how much money someone has received. So know that these guidelines of requirements for documentation, we figure out a way to make it work. Additionally, and this part is a hang up for people, if there's more than one person listed on the lease or the ledger that is over 18 in the household, we also have to verify their income. Again, this was put in place because Treasury wanted to ensure that we were getting the funds to the most vulnerable and that the person didn't have another person in the household that really could contribute to the rent who's choosing not to. Additionally, We need proof of financial hardship related to COVID-19. So there are about 4 categories that people generally fall into. And the first is they've had a job loss as related to COVID-19, or they've had a reduction in their wages as a result of COVID-19, or they've had childcare challenges as a result of COVID-19, or they've experienced illness as a result of COVID-19. Anything that falls outside of those categories, we'll certainly figure out a way to make sure it's tied to a financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, but typically those are the categories that we see people falling into. Additionally, we ask for a current utility bill if applicable. Now, on the application, you have an opportunity to upload all of these documents, and you can do them from a smartphone or from a computer. And we do accept documents that have been scanned or a very clear photo has been taken of those documents. A good majority of the applicants will just simply take a picture with their cell phone and upload that, which is completely acceptable. And also what we recognize is that there may be some documents that have several pages to it. Some leases are, 14 pages, and a person can't take a picture of all of them. What we do ask at a minimum is that someone will take a picture of the first page, which tells us the information we need to know about the lease, about the rent, and about the time frame in which that rental agreement is in place, and also the signature pages that everybody's on the same side. Now, documentation is a large barrier for many people. We will exhaust every opportunity to get the required documentation that we need, but we do have an option for a self-attestation, in which it does require a bit of a narrative for people to tell us about their hardship or about their income if they're not able to provide the documents. But as an organization, we're required to show that we've exhausted every other means possible to gather documentation before we move to that step. But we don't want documentation to be the full barrier for someone to getting access to the funds, but please recognize that we have to try multiple times. Next slide, please. So now let's talk a little bit about the available assistance. So right now, someone can receive up to 12 months of assistance, plus an additional 3 months if it's determined that they need the extra months in order to maintain housing stability. As I mentioned, the arrears can go back to March 13th of 2020. And we have to pay arrears before we can pay any future assistance. So the caveat to this is now we are in July of 2021, which means we are beyond the 12-month mark, going back to March 13th. People can only receive within their period of time 15 months of assistance. So we may have an applicant that did an application back in February and they needed assistance going back to March and they needed 3 months forward. They have almost exhausted all of their available assistance that they could receive. And it is difficult to tell a tenant, I'm sorry, but we can no longer help you because you've exceeded the amount of time that we can pay for. That's a reality that's happening right now. So as you are working with tenants, please tell them and ask them, how many months have you received before? If none, there are no problems. But if they have received some, be sure to do that calculation and have a realistic conversation with them and say, we may need to look for other sources outside of the RAMP CLT program if you have met your threshold. But if they haven't, they can reapply after that 3-month period of time. Now, just because they have an application on file and they've received assistance with us in the past, they do have to go through the application process again because circumstances might have changed. And so at the end of that 3 months forward, if someone needs additional assistance, we'll ask them to enter a new application, provide us with a reference to their old application, and then we'll evaluate if their situation has changed and we'll allow them to be awarded again. In most situations it does, but some people think, well, I've already got an application on file. Do I need another one? The answer is yes. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the eviction moratorium lifting. It is looming over us in just a couple of days, in fact. So we have to shift our priorities. As you saw, that we went from 3 priorities to 5, but we also have to do some other things different in order to meet the population that's going to have the most need. So In conversations with the City of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County, we have a response, and that is to focus in on those that have evictions and court dates. We're going to provide on-site application options alongside community partners. In fact, just today, hot off the press, we have worked with the county in order to work with a collaborative group to be inside the courtroom and be able to make on-the-spot determinations about someone who is facing eviction. Again, the one main reason that people may not receive our funding is because they don't have a COVID-related hardship, and their inability to pay rent is not related to that. And so as a result, we have to refer them to another agency because these government funds are directly tied to a COVID hardship. Additionally, we have current tenants in our pipeline. As I mentioned, we've received over 14,000 applications, 9,000 of which have been processed, and we're still processing 5,000 of those. And of those 5,000, we want to make sure that if that person's priority changes, that they can notify us easily and we can move them from a priority 5 to a priority 1 if they've received an eviction. So how they would do that, again, on the RAMP CLT website, is to enter into the top right corner, which is the self-check portal. In general, that is where anyone with an application number can go and check on the status of their application. It'll tell you the step that you're in and where you are in the process in general. There will now be a new page in which someone can upload eviction documentation. And what we're looking for is that notice from the landlord as well as the court information. Upload those 2 documents, and internally my team receives an alert that says new documents have been uploaded on this file, and then we will reprioritize it so we can process it quickly if you're going to be in court within the next 90 days. I can't stress enough how important it is to get that information as soon as you receive it. Because if in fact you wait, right, it's first come, first serve within that pot as well. So please get that information in as soon as possible. Additionally, we'll be providing more resources for people, like we have a renter advantage program in which people can help with their debt consolidation in general and help make payment plans with the landlord. And we're working with community partners on resources. It will all be listed on the RAMP CLT website. Some of those resources include access to the mediation group through the City of Charlotte, as we recognize some tenants and landlords don't see eye to eye, and they may need someone, an intermediary, to say, let's figure this out together, and we're connected to the City of Charlotte mediation program. We're also connected to legal aid and crisis assistance ministry, all of these great partners who are rallying around our community to really address this effort at all angles. Next slide, please. So let's talk about where we are today. Now, some of these numbers have changed because I sent this PowerPoint as of July 21st, but through the City of Charlotte, the program started on February 1st, 2021, and last week we had remaining fund amount of $9.5 million, and we'd exhausted $14.5 million. As of this week, we have exhausted $16.2 million, and we now have $7.8 million left. On average, we are exhausting about $300,000 to $350,000 a day in assistance to help people to remain successfully housed. For Mecklenburg County, the program started in April, and we don't have any funds remaining at this point. We did exhaust $6.7 million as of June 9th, 2021. In conversation with the county, there are more dollars that will become available, and we'll be able to open up the townships again as of August 1st. We want to make sure that the townships know that they can do this application process. It is very much the same as before, where you'll see your township listed and you'll just choose that, and we'll be able to help you with county funds. The county also covers the unincorporated areas, so for those people that live in those areas, please apply for the county funds. It's all the same application. You just have a different indicator. So what does this mean from a funding perspective? It seems like $7.8 million is a lot, But when you put that into context of the amount of funds we had to start at 24 million, it's really not that much, and which is why this prioritization is going to become so important. I don't want to get anybody down, but we want to make sure that we're helping the most vulnerable of our population, which is why the eviction information, the court information to be uploaded in our system is highly important so that we can make sure people stay in their homes. Next slide, please. So what's next? Additional funding is coming, as I'd mentioned. We started off this conversation by talking about pots of funds, and that can be a little bit confusing. As I mentioned, each pot of fund has different kinds of rules, but right now we are administering the ERA, Emergency Rental Assistance, Federal Funds Pot 1, and that is being exhausted through the City of Charlotte, and it was already exhausted through Mecklenburg County. We are in ERA 2 for Mecklenburg County, and that's when we'll start on August 1st. The government has indicated that they will be sending more money through the state, which is very hopeful for us. We're happy that more funds will be infused into Charlotte and Mecklenburg County so we can help more people. Some people had asked, well, what about the HOPE funds, and why are they not in Mecklenburg County? DreamKey Partners did administer the HOPE funds up until February of 2021 before they decided to bring the program internal. We made out all of the payments that were assigned to DreamKey Partners, and then they took everything else, millions of dollars that they were responsible for. As they looked at the landscape of Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, and the state, they said there are certain jurisdictions that the HOPE program doesn't need to target because the amount of funds and the programs there don't need to be duplicated. And that happened a lot in 2020 and beginning of 2021. And so if you go to the HOPE site and you look for Mecklenburg County, it will be grayed out and it will point you to the RAMP CLT program. Anywhere else outside, the HOPE program is still present. If you do have more questions about HOPE, that's something I will answer offline, and it won't be for today. Now, one thing that is wonderful is that the Treasury has extended the time in which we have to administer these funds. So as more dollars get infused into our community, we'll be able to help people going through 2025, and that's as long as the funds are available. Our goal is to make sure that we push them out as fast as possible, but we recognize that, you know, with the funds coming down, people are going to need help beyond 2021, and hopefully our funds will be able to do that. If not, we will help as many people as possible with the funds that are available. Some things that keep us up at night is how do we reach the most vulnerable population? We recognize that COVID-19 really did inhibit us from reaching those who are experiencing the digital divide or just have challenges in general with putting in an application on a computer or a phone. And so in-person on-site applications will become critical to the work that we do. Additionally, hotels are a large focus. We have a large group of transient people who are in need of assistance to remain successfully housed, and we need to lean into that and going to hotels and talking with the people that live there. As I mentioned before, being inside the courtroom is going to become critical. If we can be that last line of defense as someone is in the courthouse and can get them an immediate approval, that will help them to not go forward with the proceedings. And we continue to evaluate where there are a low number of applications but a high number of lower income individuals and families that might have been impacted by COVID-19, and working with community partners to target those areas. Some people have asked me, well, Erin, what can we do as an organization to help you with this process? And the thing that can help us the most is by, number one, providing feedback and giving us insight as to any challenges or barriers that you've seen in working with the program, recognizing we're not perfect. We're certainly still learning as rules and regulations change through the Treasury, but we're getting funds out the door. But we want to hear your feedback. Also, if you have a very particular organization that is struggling with their tenants to gain access to the funds, let's partner together and let's create that on-site application process. And lastly, please spread the word about the program. many organizations and owners and tenants can tell others about the programs coming open on the 1st of August, and we want to make sure that people know about that. So with that, I will end my part of the presentation and move on to questions, because I'm sure you have a lot of them. Thank you.
Thanks, Erin. We have a few questions that I will state so you can answer. But as far as the attendees, if you have a question and you would like an answer, if you could please enter your answer in the chat feature, and I'll make sure that we cover it. Erin, the first question that was posed is that from an attendee is, I need help with my rent and water bills, and I haven't been able to pay my rent since February of this year, and I couldn't get help, and basically wanting to know, can I get help because I've basically given up?
First, I really hate to hear that. Number one, we don't want anyone to give up. It is a process to gain access to funds, but it's not anywhere near impossible. So I'm going to encourage you to contact DreamKey Partners. I'm sure my information will be shared as a result of this webinar, and we can talk about your particular situation. There's several resources that you can go through. Yes, it's the RAMP CLT program, but also Contact Crisis Assistance Ministry, and we can also point you to other resources. At the very least, please do not give up. We will find a way.
The next question poses that have been unable to make contact with RAMP in answering the phone, have not been able to leave a message. What should I do?
Yeah, I sincerely apologize for. We have that feedback quite often because our phone line gets bogged up, messages are left. Again, we have over 14,000 people who've had applications, and they're calling us frequently and trying to contact us. So first, I apologize. We haven't found a way to make that system more efficient just yet so that we can get to each person. But through the portal that I was sharing about, if you have information that you need to upload, a note, anything, you can put that into the portal and it will alert the person that is assigned to your file. Now, also recognize that each person is first come, first serve within the priority that they're in. And so if someone is at a higher priority, it will take us significantly longer time to be able to work with them because we're focused in on what Treasury has told us to focus in on, which is the most vulnerable. And so I want to make sure that you're using the phone number one. I know it may be, the mailbox may be full, but please keep calling. Also use the email option on the RAMP CLT site, as well as the upload option to say, this is a need that I have. Throughout those three things, we should be able to get in contact with you. Also, my information will be available and you can shoot me an email and give me your application number.
Okay, great. The next question poses, is it too late to ask RAMP for help?
No, it's certainly not too late to ask RAMP for help. As I mentioned, we do have over $7 million still available in the funds, and we're going to receive more from the county. So please put in an application as of the 1st of August and get access to the help that you need.
Okay. Who do I submit documents to if I can't get through?
If I'm going to need a little bit of clarification, I might assume this person. Go ahead.
I'm assuming that they're saying if they have challenges or they've had challenges in submitting documentation to RAMP, what would they do in that instance if they are unable to submit the documents or having challenges submitting documents to you?
Yeah, no problem. So when you submit the application, we need something that's uploaded into the documents file so that the application itself will go through. So if you're having challenges, you can upload anything. We've had people send pictures of their grandchildren and or a screenshot of a text that says, I can't upload my documents. That's a great way to communicate with us so that when our counselor is assigned to you, they can work with you individually to get the documents uploaded. There's a few ways that we've had this happen. The first is we've worked with landlords to scan in documents on behalf of the tenant and just directly email it to the counselor that's responsible for that file. We have arranged pickups. So if there's a local local organization that you're familiar with, you can leave the documents there and I can send my team out to grab it. We are not place-based at this point because of COVID-19. This is a virtual program, and so there isn't necessarily an office that you can mail things to, but we'll find an individual arrangement that works for you that we can get those documents in. I've had great community partners say, I'll go pick them up for you, I'll scan them in because I'm in proximity to that tenant. But when you're doing the application, I urge you put something in the file, anything that you're able to put in, even if it's not your required documentation.
Okay, next question is, will there be no more funds and the moratorium stopping on July 31st? Is there still time for help?
Yes, there's absolutely still time for help. So with the moratorium lifting, we do have funds available. With Mecklenburg County, we did run out of funds, but we will have more funds available as of August 1st. In anticipation of the moratorium, we want to make sure that people gain access to the funds that we have. And if at any point we do run out of funds or we're getting very low on funds, there's a notification sent to everyone in the pipeline to make them aware of that, and resources that they can access for other places that they might be able to find funding.
Okay. What if your landlord didn't accept funds?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have seen that situation where a landlord would refuse to participate in the program. There's a couple of things that happen there. Number one, we contact the landlord to find out what is the barrier and why do you not want to participate in the program. And most of the time, a landlord will say, well, I don't want to agree to the landlord-tenant agreement. The landlord-tenant agreement is in place so that landlords understand that they cannot evict someone for non-payment during the time of their award. So that might mean 3 months forward, and some landlords aren't willing to do that, even though it does protect the tenant and gives them housing stability. So we will send that information over to the City of Charlotte's mediation team, and they have agreed that they will work with the landlord and the tenant to come to a resolve of some kind. And then they'll communicate back with the CLT. I apologize for my dogs. They'll communicate back with the RAMP CLT program and let us know that this has been resolved and we can move forward. Now, in the instance that we've tried mediation, we've tried to contact them, they still refused, we do have an option to pay the tenant directly. Now, that is something that we can do, but it's not something that we're encouraging because we don't have the protections for the tenant. That tenant could get the fund, they could pay for their rent, but then still be immediately evicted, and that's why we need that agreement.
Great. Next question is, so if you receive HOPE funds, do those months count toward RAMP CLT months?
So if you received HOPE funds, then we would see that in the ledger. So for example, if someone received HOPE funds and it paid all the way through July, and we get the ledger, we would just not pay back to when you received additional grant funding from another resource like HOPE. We would begin in July and then go forward. So it does not directly impact someone receiving rent funds at all. We just won't duplicate payments.
Okay. I'm in need of your help to redirect me in the right area. My landlord is not doing any repairs at my unit.
Yeah, so when that happens, you can certainly express that to any of our counselors and tell them, you know, I have a myriad of issues outside of just rent challenges, and then we will connect them to a resource that best fits that category. Likely that would be legal aid. Legal aid has the expertise with their lawyers to really look at a fair housing, to take into consideration what tenant rights are and what the expectation of the landlord is. That is not an expertise that we have. We are not lawyers, but we will point you in the right direction.
My landlord referred me, and I have been waiting on assistance since June. Will I be able to receive funds, please? Thanks.
So, absolutely. So I'm glad your landlord referred you to the program. That's fantastic. Will you be able to receive funds? That's dependent on a few things. So number one, did you turn in all of your documentation or communicated that you'd like to get your documentation in? Number two, which priority category do you fall into? Again, we really have to focus on the most vulnerable, and if you're the most vulnerable, then you are likely in the queue to receive the assistance. And if the landlord says, you know what, I just need something that says that you're in process, or I'm going to have to move towards eviction. Like, let's connect so that the counselor can provide you with a statement that says this person is in the RAMP CLT program. Please consider not evicting. And oftentimes that will help to give time between receiving funding and the landlord filing eviction.
Okay, another question is, should I just wait to get put out, I'm assuming, of the residence, or go to court before help is available?
So neither of those should be applicable. If you do in fact receive an eviction notification, you need to make us aware so that we can reprioritize and make sure that we keep you in your home. We do not want you to get put out or have to go to court. That's not the goal. One of the things that we talked about today with with Mecklenburg County and the court systems is that while people will be receiving a notification of a court date, the court date is not immediate. For example, if you receive a notification because eviction has been filed on August 2nd, your court date is not going to be until the end of the month. That gives us time to work with you to ensure that we can avoid that court date altogether. And that is one of our objectives.
Can you repeat what was said about being able to reapply if you've applied last year?
So if you applied in 2020, that has no bearing on 2021. So for example, if someone applied in March of last year and received a significant amount of funding that got them through December of 2020, that year is closed and we close that pot of funding. You can reapply if you are still experiencing a hardship. So in February, when the applications opened again, you were eligible to reapply. The reason that we have a cap now is because we're within the same pots of funding. So that's a little bit complicated, but the short answer is yes, you can reapply if you applied for funds in 2020. And for this pot of fund, these rounds in 2021, you can't exceed 15 months of assistance.
Okay. I've changed jobs twice, and the document portions for how COVID affected me is no longer valid due to the change in jobs. I have increased my income. I have not been able to catch up the arrears. What can I do?
So you are absolutely still able to apply for the program and qualify. Just because you've now gotten a job that increased your wage, it doesn't necessarily mean it increased it enough to pay your arrears, and we recognize that. You've still had a direct impact as a result of COVID because you've had a job change or loss within the period of time that COVID has existed going back to March. So I encourage you to still apply so that you can receive assistance to help you with those arrears. You may not need help with going forward, which leaves it open for if you experience a hardship in the future, you can reapply.
Okay, next question is basically, does this have anything to do with Section 8?
It does not.
Okay. The next question is pretty lengthy. It says, I need help with my rent. I still haven't received my 2020 tax refund, and finally found out I need to verify my identity with the IRS. It can still take up to 120 days to receive my rent refund. I've also had unexpected car trouble. When it rains, it pours.
So in those situations, we want to work with you individually. A few things I pulled out from what you said, that you didn't get your refund, you have to verify your identity. Proof of income doesn't necessarily have to be the tax reporting. So we can find other ways for you to show that you've been impacted by COVID and you've had a challenge with your income that led to you not being able to pay your rent. That's fine. As far as the car repair challenges, that is unfortunately something that the RAMP CLT program does not cover. But we do have other community partners that are assisting people, like the Goodfellows group. They are assisting people with other hardships that are not related to rent or their mortgage or utilities. So we would point you in that direction. But I encourage you to apply anyways, even though the tax information is not available.
Okay, someone is, I'm assuming they're asking a question, but I'm going to pose to that person if they could explain a little bit further, but I will read their comment It says, my whole family contacted COVID-19 and I was terminated from my job. I think it's unemployment. I have no income, just SNAP. So I'm assuming they're wanting some clarification or maybe see if they can get some assistance, I'm assuming, from the question.
If they could offer just a little bit more clarification, I'd be able to answer that more specifically.
Okay, I'll move on to one more question that'll close out this portion. It says, I'm a frontline worker. I'm struggling with rent. My wife is unable to work due to COVID because she's has a critical illness. So I am only one working in the household of 4, and we're facing eviction. I'm just wanting to know if the application I put in, will I be eligible?
Yes, you'll be eligible. So when we talked in the very beginning about direct or indirectly impacted by COVID, you would fall directly into that category. So while you are still gainfully employed, your wife unfortunately is not able to work as a result of COVID, and you're in the same household. That means that you qualify because at least one person in the household has to have been impacted and have a hardship in order to qualify. So when you complete your application, you would complete your application on your behalf and behalf of your wife. You would put her information in and make us aware that she was the one that lost her job, or that who cannot work, and that's the qualifying factor. So absolutely, I encourage you to apply.
Okay, great. This concludes our portion on the question and answers, and Tamika will now explain to us where persons can follow up with their questions that they may have. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Erin, again. So I know we did have a question in the chat. Was the rent program related to Section 8? It is not. Those services are available to families within the Charlotte-Mecklenburg County community. However, there are some additional resources for families that are assisted by INLIVIAN. Families that are in the Housing Choice Voucher or project-based voucher programs, as well as our public housing programs, may report income decreases to their property manager or assigned housing specialist. If you're not aware of who your property manager or assigned housing specialist is, you may contact our customer care center. It is open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The phone number to call would be 704-336-5183. Additionally, families assisted by INLIVIAN may qualify for minimum rent hardship. Currently, INLIVIAN's minimum rent is $75. Families that can qualify for a minimum rent hardship could be those families who have lost or are awaiting an eligibility determination for federal, state, or local assistance, a family that would be evicted from having to pay our $75 minimum rent. In order to qualify under that category with your minimum rent hardship request, you would need to provide a copy of your delinquency letter or eviction notice. Families may also qualify for a minimum hardship exemption if the family's income has decreased because of changed circumstances, or if the family has experienced an increase in expenses related to medical costs, childcare, transportation, or education. The last reason that a family may request a minimum rent hardship is if there was a death that occurred in the family and the expenses has caused a financial hardship to the family. We have temporary and long-term minimum rent hardship exemptions based on the circumstances, and the duration of the hardship will be determined by a hardship committee. For those who qualify for a short-term minimum rent hardship, they would be required to repay the funds at the end of the hardship period. If you have any additional questions regarding the Housing Choice Voucher Program, you may contact myself, Tamika Melvin, at tmelvin@inlivian.com, or Kia Coffins, our housing provider outreach specialist at kcoffin@INLIVIAN.com. Today's session has been recorded and will be posted on our social media platforms. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to our Lunch and Learn session next month, where we talk about the benefits of partnering with INLIVIAN's Housing Choice Voucher Program. Thank you.